I had always believed that secrets were safest when they lived quietly inside you, unnamed and unexamined. If you didn't speak them aloud, if you didn't even think them too clearly, they couldn't hurt anyone. That was the rule I'd lived by for years, especially about the parts of myself that didn't fit neatly into family dinners, wedding conversations, or the easy laughter of people who assumed I was just like them. That summer, the house was louder than usual. My aunt had decided without consulting anyone that the old family home should host our scattered relatives for a few weeks. The reason kept changing: renovations in the city, nostalgia, a need for togetherness. I suspected loneliness. Whatever it was, it meant a house full of voices, footsteps, and memories that creaked as loudly as the stairs. And it meant him. Ryan arrived on a Sunday afternoon, sunburned and smiling, a duffel bag slung over one shoulder like he was stepping out of a movie scene rather than onto our cracked stone porch. He had always looked like that, effortlessly at ease in his own body, like the world was a place that welcomed him instead of something to survive. My straight cousin, the phrase had never mattered before. It had never even crossed my mind as something worth nodding. Until it did. "Hey, stranger," he said when he saw me, dropping his bag and pulling me into a quick, familiar hug. The scent of soap and sun clung to him, and for half a second I froze, my arms stiff at my sides before I remembered how to be normal. "Hey," I replied, stepping back too quickly. "Long time." "Too long," he said, flashing that grin that always made people feel chosen. "You look different." I shrugged. "Older." "Calmer," he said after a beat, "or maybe sadder, hard to tell." I laughed it off because that's what I always did when someone came close to the truth. Ryan had grown up like a brother to me. Summers at this same house, scraped knees, shared rooms, whispered conversations after lights out. When he left for college and then for work in another city, he became a story we told. Remember when Ryan did this? Remember how Ryan was? I didn't remember him like that anymore. Now I noticed the way his shoulders had broadened, the quiet confidence in the way he moved through space. I noticed how easily people leaned toward him when he spoke, and more dangerously, I noticed the strange tightening in my chest when our eyes met and lingered a second too long. I told myself it was nothing: nostalgia, surprise, family comfort. I told myself a lot of things that summer. The first week passed in fragments: shared meals, late-night card games, trips to the old lake where nothing had changed except us. Ryan and I fell into an easy rhythm, the way people do when history fills in the silences. But the silences were different now. One evening, after everyone had gone to bed, I found him on the back porch, staring out into the dark. "Can't sleep?" I asked. He shook his head. "Too quiet where I live. This place feels alive." I leaned against the railing beside him. The night smelled like damp earth and pine. Fireflies flickered in the distance like tiny, uncertain stars. "You ever feel like you're not where you're supposed to be?" he asked suddenly. The question landed heavier than he probably meant it to. "All the time," I said. He glanced at me, curiosity sharpening his expression. "Yeah. Yeah." For a moment I thought he might ask more. Instead, he nodded, as if that answer alone connected us in some invisible way. That was how it started, not with longing or confession but with quiet recognition. The next few days blurred together. We took long walks, talked about work and plans and the lives we were building separately. He told me about his girlfriends, always with affection, never with depth. I told him about my job, my apartment, the carefully edited version of my life that left out the empty spaces. He never asked why I'd never mentioned anyone I was seeing. I never volunteered the truth. The moment that changed everything came on a Thursday afternoon. The house was mostly empty. My aunt had taken the others into town. I'd stayed behind, claiming a headache that was half excuse, half truth. I was in my room, door closed, sitting on the edge of my bed with my thoughts spiraling too fast to keep up with. I wasn't doing anything scandalous, nothing dramatic, just holding something I wasn't ready to explain, staring at it like it might explain me. I didn't hear Ryan's footsteps. The door opened. "Hey, he stopped mid-sentence. The silence that followed was sharp and absolute. I looked up. He was frozen in the doorway, eyes wide, confusion flickering across his face as his gaze took in the scene, me, my expression, the truth I'd never planned to share. "I'm sorry," he said quickly, already stepping back. "I didn't know you were." "Wait," I said, the word tearing out of me before I could stop it. He hesitated, hand still on the doorframe. I should have knocked, he added. I didn't mean to. It's okay, I said, though my heart was hammering. I mean, it's not, but just don't go yet. He didn't leave. The air between us felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. I could see questions lining up behind his eyes, uncertainty battling something else I couldn't name. I didn't realize, he said carefully. I mean, I never thought. I know, I said, most people don't. The words hung there, fragile and exposed. He took a step inside, closing the door behind him with deliberate slowness. Are you okay? He asked. That simple question undid me more than anything else could have. I don't know, I admitted. I've been pretending I am for a long time. He nodded, jaw tight, like he was absorbing more than just my words. I didn't mean to find out like that, he said, but I'm glad you told me, or that I know. I laughed softly, without humor. You didn't exactly find out because I told you. Still, he said, you could have shut me out, you didn't. Neither of us mentioned what he'd seen. We didn't need to. The truth was bigger than details. That was the day something shifted. We didn't touch, we didn't confess anything. But when he left my room, closing the door gently behind him, I knew deep in my bones that whatever we'd been before wasn't enough to contain what was coming next. Outside, the house settled back into its familiar sounds. Inside me, everything had changed. After Ryan walked out of my room, the house felt different, too quiet, like it was holding its breath. I sat there for a long time, staring at the closed door, replaying the moment again and again. The look on his face hadn't been anger or disgust. It had been shock, yes, but also something softer, something uncertain. That scared me more than rejection ever could. I told myself not to read into it. Ryan was straight, he always had been. Whatever reaction he'd had was probably just concern, maybe surprise mixed with family loyalty. Nothing more. Still, when I finally left my room hours later, my chest felt tight, like I'd stepped into a world where gravity worked differently. At dinner that night, Ryan was quieter than usual. He laughed at the right moments, answered questions, passed the salt, but his eyes kept flicking toward me, then away. Every glance felt like a question neither of us was ready to ask. I focused on my plate, appetite gone. You okay? My aunt asked. You barely touched your food. Just tired, I said quickly. Same, Ryan added, a little too fast. Our eyes met for half a second before he looked down. That was the beginning of the distance. Over the next few days, he kept himself busy. Morning runs, trips into town, long phone calls taken outside, his voice low and unreadable. When we were in the same room, conversation stayed safe, whether chores, old jokes we'd told 100 times before. But the space between us pulsed with unspoken things. At night, I lay awake listening to the sounds of the house, wondering what he was thinking, wondering if I'd ruined something precious by letting him see too much. On the fourth day after it happened, I found him in the garage, working on an old bike that hadn't run in years. You know that thing's never going to start, I said from the doorway. He startled slightly, then relaxed when he saw me. Yeah, guess I just like the idea that it might. I stepped closer, the smell of oil and dust filling the air. You've been avoiding me. He didn't deny it. I didn't want to say the wrong thing, he said quietly. So you chose to say nothing. He set the wrench down, wiping his hands on a rag. I didn't know what you needed. The honesty in his voice cracked something open inside me. I don't need fixing, I said, or pity. I know, he said quickly, that's not I've been thinking a lot. I crossed my arms, more to steady myself than anything else. About what? About you, he admitted. About us, about how I never noticed how alone you seemed. The words landed heavier than I expected. I was good at hiding it, I said. He looked at me, then really looked. You shouldn't have had to. Silence stretched between us, thick and fragile. I'm straight, he said finally, as if stating a fact out loud might anchor him. I've always been. I don't want to confuse you. I'm not confused, I replied, even though part of me absolutely was. I didn't expect anything from you. He nodded, relief and something like disappointment flickering across his face. Good, he said, because I don't know what I'm feeling, and that scares me. That scared me too. After that conversation, the tension shifted. It didn't disappear, but it changed shape. We started talking again, carefully at first, then more freely. Late-night conversations returned, though they felt charged now, like each word carried weight. One evening, we sat on the porch steps, the air warm and heavy. The others were inside watching a movie, laughter spilling through the open windows. "Do you ever wish you could start over?" Ryan asked. "All the time," I said, "but I don't think it works like that." "Yeah," he said softly, "I guess not." He leaned back on his hands, gaze fixed on the dark yard. "I've spent my whole life knowing exactly who I was supposed to be. Lately, it feels smaller than I thought." I swallowed. "That doesn't mean you have to change." He turned toward me. "What if I already am?" My heart thudded painfully in my chest. "Ryan," I said carefully, "you don't owe me anything, and I don't want to be the reason you doubt yourself." "You're not," he said, "you're just making me see things differently." The way he said it, soft, almost vulnerable, made my breath hitch. For a moment, the distance between us felt unbearably small. He reached out, then hesitated and let his hand fall back to his side. The almost touch lingered like a ghost. "I should go inside," he said, standing too quickly. "Yeah," I agreed, though neither of us moved right away. That night, I dreamed of standing at the edge of something vast, Ryan beside me. In the dream, he took my hand, but when I looked down, it slipped through his fingers like smoke. The next day brought the first real crack. We were at the lake, sunlight dancing on the water. I waded in, the cold stealing my breath, while Ryan swam out farther, strong strokes cutting through the surface. "Come on," he called, "it's not that bad." I followed, laughing despite myself. For a while, everything felt normal, easy, familiar. Then I slipped. It wasn't dramatic, but panic flared as my foot lost purchase on the rocks. Water rushed into my ears, disorienting me. Hands grabbed me almost instantly, steady and sure. "I've got you," Ryan said, close enough that I could feel his breath against my temple. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to that contact, his arms around me, my hands gripping his shoulders. When we surfaced, he didn't let go right away. "You okay?" he asked, voice tight. I nodded, suddenly very aware of how close we were, too close. He pulled back abruptly, eyes dark. "I shouldn't," he started, then stopped. "We should be careful." The words stung more than I expected. "I know," I said quietly. We swam back in silence. That night I lay awake again, chest aching with a mix of hope and dread. Something was building between us, undeniable and dangerous. And neither of us knew how to stop it. The tension didn't explode the way I half expected it to. It didn't resolve itself neatly either. Instead, it settled into us, quiet, persistent, shaping every interaction like an invisible current pulling us slightly off balance. Ryan became careful in a way that hurt more than distance. He stood a little farther away. He avoided accidental touches. When our conversations drifted toward anything personal, he redirected them with a joke or a change of subject. I told myself it was for the best. I lied. One afternoon, my aunt announced we'd be having guests for dinner, family friends I barely remembered bringing along their daughter, Lily. The way Ryan's name lit up her face when she arrived made something twist sharply inside me. She was warm and confident, the kind of person who fit easily into every room. She laughed at Ryan's stories, touched his arm when she spoke, leaned in close like it was the most natural thing in the world. I watched from across the table, forcing myself to smile. "This is Lily," my aunt said. "She and Ryan used to be inseparable." "Inseparable," I echoed lightly. Ryan shot me a look I couldn't read. That was a long time ago. But Lily didn't seem to think so. After dinner, she pulled him outside, their silhouettes visible through the window as they talked animatedly. I stayed inside, helping clear dishes I didn't need to touch. "Are you okay?" my aunt asked gently. "Yeah," I said, "just tired." It was always tired. Later that night, Ryan knocked on my door. I opened it to find him looking restless, hands shoved into his pockets. "Can we talk?" he asked. My heart kicked hard against my ribs. "Sure." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. The familiar gesture felt heavier now. "You were quiet tonight," he said. "So were you," I replied. He ran a hand through his hair. "Lily asked if I was seeing anyone." I kept my expression neutral with practiced ease, and I didn't know what to say, he admitted, "because I'm not, but it doesn't feel like the whole truth." I looked at him then, really looked. The uncertainty on his face mirrored my own fears. "You don't owe me explanations," I said carefully. "I know," he said, "but I don't want to lie, not to you." Silence pressed in around us. "She's leaving tomorrow," he added, "before anything starts." The words shouldn't have mattered, they did. "I don't want to be your secret crisis," I said quietly, "or the reason you pull away from something normal." "What if normal doesn't fit anymore?" he asked. The question hung there, dangerous and tempting. Before I could answer, a knock sounded at the door. My aunt's voice floated down the hall, calling Ryan for help outside. He hesitated, eyes lingering on mine. "We'll finish this later." But later never comes the way you expect. The next morning, Lily left. Ryan drove her to the bus station. When he came back, something about him felt different, quieter, like he'd made a decision he wasn't ready to explain. That evening, a storm rolled in, sudden and fierce. Rain hammered the roof, thunder rattling the windows. The power flickered once, twice, then went out entirely. The house erupted in groans and laughter. Candles were dug out, phones became flashlights. I ended up in the living room with Ryan, the rest of the family dispersed into smaller groups. "Guess we're stuck," he said, settling onto the couch across from me. "Could be worse," I replied. Lightning flashed, illuminating his face for a brief second, serious, intent. "I've been trying to draw lines," he said suddenly, "pretend they're clear. And they keep blurring," he admitted, "especially with you." My breath caught. "Ryan, I'm not asking for anything," he said quickly. "I just need you to know I'm not ignoring this, or you." The confession sent a fragile hope fluttering through me. Thunder cracked overhead. Instinctively, he reached for my hand, then froze. "It's okay," I said softly. He let his fingers close around mine, tentative at first, then firmer. The contact was simple, innocent, and devastating. Neither of us spoke, we didn't need to. Footsteps sounded in the hallway. We pulled apart instantly, the moment shattered. Later that night, alone in my room, my phone buzzed. "Ryan, I don't know where this is going, but I know I don't want to lose you." I stared at the message for a long time before replying. I'm still here." Outside, the storm eased, leaving the air charged and restless. Inside me, something fragile and dangerous had taken root. The days after the storm felt stretched thin, like glass pulled too far. Ryan and I moved around each other with careful politeness, every shared glance loaded with meaning. We never spoke about the hand-holding. We didn't have to. It lived between us, undeniable. But the house was no longer just ours. Family had a way of sensing change. My aunt watched us more closely now, her questions sharper, her smiles lingering a second too long. Conversations paused when we entered rooms together. Laughter sometimes arrived a beat late. I started pulling back. Not because I wanted to, but because I had learned over a lifetime that desire was safest when it stayed invisible. Ryan noticed. "You've been quiet again," he said one afternoon as we washed dishes side by side. His arm brushed mine accidentally, sending a spark straight through me. "I'm fine," I replied, stepping away. He frowned. "That's not true." I didn't answer. That night, I overheard my aunt on the phone. "I don't know," she said in a low voice. "They're close, too close maybe. Ryan's always been affectionate, but this feels different." My chest tightened. Fear has a way of making decisions for you. The next morning, I told Ryan I needed space. We stood at the edge of the yard, the early sun casting long shadows across the grass. "Space from what?" he asked. "From this," I said, gesturing vaguely between us, "from whatever we're doing." His face fell. "Did I do something wrong?" "No," I said quickly, "you didn't do anything, that's the problem." He searched my face. "You're scared." "So are you," I shot back. "Yes," he admitted, "but I'm not running." The word stung. "I don't get the luxury of not running," I said quietly. "You do." He went very still. "That's not fair." "Neither is this," I said. "You get to question things, I've had to survive them." Silence fell heavy between us. "I don't want to hurt you," he said finally. "Then don't," I replied. "Let this go." He nodded, jaw clenched. "If that's what you want." It was. But wanting had never been enough. For the next week, we barely spoke. Ryan spent more time out of the house. I buried myself in chores, in work emails, in anything that kept me from thinking. Then came the night everything cracked. It was my aunt's birthday, the house filled with people, music, wine, laughter spilled into the yard, lights strung across the porch glowing warm and forgiving. Ryan arrived late, dressed sharper than usual. He brought a gift, hugged my aunt, smiled for photos. And brought someone with him. Her name was Claire. She was kind, beautiful, easy. The way she fit her hand into his as if it belonged there made my throat close. "This is Claire," Ryan said, introducing her around. "We've been seeing each other." The words hit like a quiet explosion. I smiled, congratulated him, excused myself. In the bathroom, I stared at my reflection, willing myself not to break. My hands shook as I turned on the tap, splashing cold water on my face. "This is what you asked for," I reminded myself. But logic does nothing for grief. Later, as the party thinned, I felt a presence behind me on the back porch. "You okay?" Ryan asked softly. I didn't turn around. "You don't get to ask me that." "I didn't bring her to hurt you," he said. "I know," I replied. "You brought her because you're trying to be who you think you should be." "That's not fair," he said again. "Neither is standing 10 feet away from me holding her hand," I said, finally facing him. My voice broke, but here we are. He looked torn, guilty, human. "I chose this," he said quietly, "because you told me to let it go." "I told you because I was scared," I whispered, "not because I stopped feeling." The truth hung between us, raw and aching. For a moment I thought he might reach for me. Instead he stepped back. "I'm sorry," he said. "So was I." That night I packed a bag. I left before sunrise, slipping out while the house slept. I didn't leave a note. I couldn't trust myself to write one without begging him to stop me. The bus pulled away as the sky lightened, the house shrinking in the distance. My phone buzzed. "Ryan, where are you?" I turned it off. Sometimes the only way to survive heartbreak is to choose absence. Even when it breaks you. Leaving felt like choosing silence over screaming. The bus ride back to the city blurred into a stretch of gray highway and half-remembered towns. I sat by the window, forehead against the glass, watching fields give way to concrete. Every mile put distance between me and the house and tightened the ache in my chest. I told myself I'd done the right thing. I told myself a lot of things that week. My apartment greeted me with stillness. No shared meals, no footsteps in the hallway, no Ryan, his laughter, his questions, the way he filled space without trying. I unpacked mechanically, placing clothes back into drawers that had never known his presence and yet felt emptier without it. The first night I slept for 12 hours, the second not at all. Messages piled up on my phone. "Ryan, please tell me you're safe." "Ryan, I shouldn't have brought her, I didn't think." "Ryan, I miss you." I read them without replying, the words both a balm and a blade. Responding would open a door I wasn't sure I could walk through. At work I functioned, smiled, met deadlines. The world doesn't pause for heartbreak, it expects you to show up anyway. At night the quiet pressed in. I replayed everything, the hand on mine during the storm, the way he'd looked at me by the lake, the hurt in his eyes when I asked for space. Regret is a clever thing, it finds new angles every time you think you've exhausted it. 3 weeks passed. Then my aunt called. "You didn't say goodbye," she said gently. "I'm sorry," I replied, "I needed time." She hesitated. "Ryan hasn't been himself since you left." My throat tightened. "He'll be fine." "I don't think this is about being fine," she said. "I think it's about being honest." After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time. Across the city, Ryan was unraveling. I learned later how he'd ended things with Claire after a week, how he'd tried to explain a feeling he didn't have words for, how he'd gone back to the lake alone, standing in the place where he'd caught me when I slipped, replaying the moment like a confession. He told himself he'd chosen safety. It didn't feel safe. One night my phone rang, unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail. "Hello." His voice came through, rough and unguarded. "It's me." I closed my eyes. "Ryan." "I needed to hear your voice," he said, "just to know you're real." "I am," I said softly. "I messed up," he said, "no excuses, just truth. I thought I could put this back in a box, pretend it was a phase, but it's not going away." My heart pounded. "That doesn't mean it's me." "It does," he said. "I just didn't want to admit it until I lost you." Silence filled the space between us, fragile and electric. I'm scared, I admitted, of being the thing you regret. I'm more scared of a life where I never tried, he replied. We talked for hours that night about childhood, expectations, fear, about how loving someone doesn't erase the rest of your life, it asks you to be brave inside it. When we hung up, nothing was solved. But something had shifted. 2 weeks later, Ryan showed up in my city. I found him waiting outside my building, hands shoved into his jacket pockets, looking out of place and resolute. I didn't come to ask you to fix this, he said when I reached him. I came to own my part. And what is that? I asked. That I let fear decide for me, he said, and I don't want it to anymore. I studied his face, searching for certainty. This isn't a movie, it doesn't end with one big speech. I know, he said, it ends with choices, over and over. I nodded slowly. Come upstairs, I said. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, the distance intentional. I'm not asking you to promise me forever, he said. I'm asking you to let me try openly, honestly. I swallowed hard. And if it hurts? It will, he said, but I don't think it will hurt like pretending. I looked at him, really looked. The boy I'd grown up with was gone. In his place was a man choosing uncertainty over comfort. Stay, I said finally. He did. Not in my bed, not in my arms. But in my life. And for the first time, the future felt terrifying and possible. Ryan staying didn't mean everything suddenly made sense. It meant mornings filled with cautious smiles and nights heavy with conversations that circled the truth without landing on it. It meant relearning each other in a new context, one where feelings were acknowledged but not yet claimed. We took things slowly, almost painfully so. He slept on the couch when he stayed over, insisting on it even when I told him he didn't have to. The restraint wasn't rejection, it was respect. Still, every quiet moment between us hummed with everything we weren't doing. The city became our neutral ground. We walked unfamiliar streets, drank coffee in places no one knew us, shared stories without worrying who might overhear. With strangers, it was easy to exist without labels. With each other, it was harder and more honest. One afternoon, as we sat in a small cafe tucked between bookstores, Ryan went quiet. What happens when we go back? He asked. I knew what he meant, family history, the house. Everything gets louder, I said, nothing stays hidden. He nodded, fingers tightening around his mug. I don't want to hide anymore. The words should have comforted me, instead they scared me. Wanting to be seen and being ready for the consequences are two different things. The call came sooner than expected. My aunt's voice was strained. Your grandmother in the hospital, it's serious. We were on a train within the hour. The ride back felt different this time, less escape, more reckoning. Ryan sat beside me close enough that our shoulders touched, he didn't pull away. At the hospital, the family gathered in fragments, whispers, worried glances, shared fear. In moments like that, roles reassert themselves quickly. Grandson, nephew, cousin. And something unnamed. Ryan stayed near me instinctively. When the doctor spoke, when the waiting stretched on, his presence grounded me. But eyes noticed. A cousin's raised eyebrow, an aunt's pause mid-sentence, the subtle shift of attention. Later in the hallway, my aunt pulled me aside. Are you and Ryan okay? She asked carefully. Yes, I said, it was the truth, even if it wasn't the whole one. She studied me for a long moment, just be kind to each other. That night, exhausted, we sat outside the hospital under harsh fluorescent lights. I'm tired of pretending, Ryan said quietly, not just with them, with myself. I looked at him. Once you say it out loud, you can't take it back. I know, he said, but I don't want my life to be built on silence. The next morning, his mother arrived. She hugged him tightly, relief softening her face. Then she noticed me standing beside him and the way he didn't move away. We found ourselves alone with her in the cafeteria. She didn't waste time. Is there something I should know? She asked. Ryan's breath hitched. I felt it before I saw it. Yes, he said. My heart hammered. I care about him, he continued, voice steady but low, more than as family. Silence fell. His mother's expression shifted, surprise first, then something like grief, then thoughtfulness. This is new, she said slowly. It's not, he replied, it's just new that I'm saying it. She looked at me then, not accusing, assessing. Are you happy? She asked. I answered honestly, I'm trying to be. She exhaled, that's not an answer I expected, but it's a real one. She reached for Ryan's hand, I don't understand everything, but I raised you to tell the truth even when it costs you. His eyes filled. The conversation didn't solve everything. But it didn't destroy us either. Later that day, in a quiet corner of the hospital garden, Ryan finally reached for me without hesitation. His hand found mine. Not hidden, not rushed. Seen. I squeezed back, fear and hope tangling tightly in my chest. Standing there, surrounded by uncertainty, I realized something had changed for good. This wasn't a secret anymore. It was a choice. Truth has a strange way of echoing. Once spoken, it doesn't disappear. It moves through rooms and conversations, reshaping them in small, irreversible ways. After Ryan spoke to his mother, nothing went back to how it was, yet nothing collapsed either. The world didn't end. It simply adjusted, slowly and unevenly. My grandmother stabilized after surgery, the crisis easing into a long, careful recovery. With the immediate fear lifted, attention returned to the quieter dramas that had been waiting patiently. Like us. The first real confrontation came from my uncle, Ryan's father. He cornered Ryan outside the hospital one evening, voice low but tight. You're confused, he said. You're under stress. Don't make permanent decisions during a temporary crisis. Ryan listened without interrupting. When his father finished, he answered calmly. This isn't new, he said. What's new is that I'm not lying about it. His father's jaw worked. You don't know what you're giving up. I do, Ryan replied, and I'm still choosing it. I watched from a distance, heart pounding with equal parts pride and fear. Loving someone means witnessing the cost of their courage and knowing part of that cost is paid for you. Not everyone reacted with confrontation, some reacted with silence. A cousin stopped inviting me to sit with her. A family friend's smile cooled. It wasn't cruelty, it was discomfort. And discomfort, I knew too well, often masqueraded as politeness. One evening back at the old house, Ryan and I finally talked alone. The house felt smaller now, filled with memories that no longer fit neatly into the past. I didn't mean for this to be so hard, he said. It was always going to be, I replied. The difference is now you're seeing it. He nodded, I wish I could protect you from it. You don't have to, I said, just don't disappear. He reached for my face then, stopping just short of touching my cheek. I'm here. That night we shared a bed for the first time. We didn't rush, we didn't need to. The intimacy was in the closeness, the shared breaths, the way his hand rested at my waist like a promise rather than a demand. When he kissed me, it was tentative, asking permission even as it answered a question we'd both been carrying for months. It was gentle, real. In the morning, sunlight spilled across the room, exposing us to ourselves. No hiding. Later that day, my aunt asked us to join her on the porch. I'm not blind, she said, folding her hands, and I won't pretend I don't see what's happening. My stomach tightened. I don't need details, she continued. I need honesty. Are you hurting each other? No, Ryan said immediately. I shook my head. We're trying not to. She sighed, trying matters. She looked at me. You've always carried things alone. Don't do that anymore. Then she looked at Ryan. And you, don't treat this like an experiment. People don't come with reset buttons. He nodded solemnly. I know. That night Ryan stood beside me at dinner, not touching, not hiding. Present. The room buzzed with awareness, but no one spoke. Sometimes peace arrives not as acceptance but as restraint. Later, under the same stars where everything had once begun, Ryan took my hand. I don't know what the future looks like, he said, but I know what I don't want it to be. And what's that? I asked. A life where I didn't choose honestly, he said, or love bravely. I leaned into him, letting myself believe, just for that moment, that choosing each other could be enough. Love, I learned, isn't the loudest thing in a room. It's the choice you keep making when the noise fades, when no one is watching, when applause is replaced by ordinary days and unresolved questions. After the long summer finally loosened its grip, life began to move forward again, imperfect and stubborn as ever. Ryan didn't stay at the house forever. Neither did I. What we stayed committed to was the work, quiet, unglamorous, real. Back in the city, our relationship found its shape. It wasn't dramatic, it was dinners that burned because we talked too long, shared grocery lists, arguments about nothing that turned out to be about fear. We learned each other's rhythms not as cousins bound by childhood but as two adults choosing presence. There were hard days. Days when Ryan questioned himself when the weight of other people's expectations pressed down on him. Days when I retreated into old habits, bracing for abandonment that didn't come. On those days, we learned a new language. "I'm scared," he would say. "I'm here," I would answer. Slowly, the echo of shame softened. We told more people carefully, some reacted with warmth, some with silence, a few with awkward honesty that felt better than polite avoidance. Each conversation carved out a little more space for us to exist. The first time we walked hand in hand through my neighborhood in daylight, my heart raced, not with fear but with awe at how ordinary it felt. "I used to think love was a secret you survived," I told him. He squeezed my hand. "I think it's a truth you grow into." Months later, we returned to the lake. The water was calmer than I remembered, or maybe we were. We stood at the edge, shoes off, toes in the cold shallows. "You saved me that day," I said quietly. He shook his head. "You saved yourself, I just showed up." I smiled because that was the difference between who we were and who we'd become. We didn't need grand declarations, we had continuity. That night, under a sky scattered with stars, Ryan rested his head on my shoulder. "I don't regret this," he said. "Me neither," I replied. For the first time, I meant it without reservation. Some stories don't end with certainty, they end with courage. Ours didn't erase the past, it honored it and then chose something better. Not secrecy, not fear, but a love built slowly, honestly, and out in the open. And in that choice, we didn't lose family. We found ourselves.